He's only an hour late, guys.
Yeah, we only had like every problem imaginable.
Yeah, the universe was trying to buy him some time.
It was trying to give him a good nap so he could wake up and get into some hot Gorgo action, but it didn't happen. All right, looks like everything's recording now.
Welcome to the exciting world of the movies.
Hello and welcome back to the movie graveyard. We are digging way back into the depths of the graveyard.
Hold on. Start over. My recording just started, so start over.
Okay, no problem.
Welcome to the exciting world of the movies.
Hello and welcome back to the movie graveyard. We're dibbing. Now you curse me, Byrd.
Welcome to the exciting world of the movies.
Hello and welcome to the movie graveyard. We're digging way back to the most ancient part of the graveyard tonight. We're digging up the oldest film we've ever discussed on the movie graveyard. In order to do this, I had to bring in some backup. I needed some true experts here. And since we are talking about an awesome, giant, epic, colossal monster film tonight, I brought along with me the co-host and co-founder of the Kaiju Transmissions, Byrd. Byrd, how are you doing tonight?
That's me. I'm so happy to be back here. I've been on here for a couple of things, and it's always a pleasure. I am representing my podcast solo, as my co-host has disappeared. He was supposed to be here, and he has no-showed to work. So anyone listening can feel free to shame him.
He was last seen on the outskirts of the woods looking for the Blair Witch. We also got another, frequent visitor to the podcast. It's been a few months since he's been gone, and we missed him for sure. We have the one and only Bird Destroyer. Not Bird as in Bird the person, but Bird as in the animal destroyer, Jelli. Jelli, how are you? How is things going in your evil lair where you're finding up a way to kill every diseased bird in North America?
Yeah, that was a fun phone call I got today. For those not in our Facebook chat, so
which is everybody.
I got a call at work today. I work for a industrial gases company that asked me to help with controlling the outbreak of avian flu, and I was like, well, we're not a hospital. And they were like, oh, no. We want you to develop a bird euthanizing device. So it's basically just feeds birds a bunch of CO2 and just kind of puts them to sleep when they get pegged as having avian flu. I don't know how these birds get found out, if this is some secret bird Hitler Holocaust thing going on.
It could be.
But yeah, I'm helping to kill some birds.
I wouldn't doubt if this whole evil scheme has been concocted by the one and only Mark Zuckerberg. Anyway, I promised you guys some epic monster action, and we're going to deliver it to you tonight. We are talking about the one and only 1961 film Gorgo, which set a lot of precedents for the, at that time, young and emerging kaiju genre. So yeah, without delay, we're going to get it rolling. We're all actually working off the same release of this film, a Blu-ray from a company called VCI. We have it paused at the 1 second mark. This movie actually starts out with the old school MGM logo with the lion. So if you get yours paused at the 1 second mark, you will see a lion that looks very sleepy and cross-eyed. So we're going to be rolling on that. If you want to follow along, I'm going to say 1, 2, 3, go. And when I say go, hit play on your remotes. Guys, do you have your remotes or other various playback devices ready?
Yes, I'm old school, or not. I guess I'm the middle school. I got the controller.
Oh, nice. Yeah.
Old school would be the remote and the Blu-ray player. Right. New school would be the game system and the remote for it.
Me and Trev many times did this show off of some actually PlayStation controllers. So yeah, we know that controller route well here. So everybody, let's get ready for some Gorgo. 1, 2, 3, go. Wake up, sleepy lion. Oh, he's roaring. Right. And on
an hour and 16 minutes, nice and brisk.
It's going to feel a lot longer though, because it's so epic.
That's one thing I love about watching old, like, monster movies and stuff, is they really don't waste
old
too
movies
much
in
time.
general. Old movies in general too. I mean, this exact same movie released today would be like an hour and 26 minutes because there'd be 13 minutes of credits.
Right, with all the CGI.
And then when you have modern writing in place, there'd be some convoluted origin and all this other stuff.
Well, I thought it was interesting that the movie just starts out straight out with a title card that just thanking the people of London, the authorities, I guess, of London, England, and I believe it was Dublin, Ireland, for helping make this film possible. So
you used to see stuff like that, like the original Godzilla has a thank you to like the Maritime Society or something.
And I don't know how they did titles back then, Byrd, but I gotta say the Gorgo font is boss.
It is a good font.
Yeah, like it looks better than the CGI created shit of now.
So
the very opening shot is not like what we're looking at right now is a little bit better, a little bit more of a steady cam. That very opening shot is like they were on a boat for that. Right. And it's rocking up and down a little bit. It's a little bit disorienting, but yeah, it gets. Now we're in a good. Watching some waves crash against some rocks.
So Goat, I want to kind of pick your brain on what this is an interesting choice for the Graveyard. First of all, it's the oldest movie you've done, as you said. I mean, you're usually in the 80s and sometimes 90s.
Yeah. We've done one film in the 2000s, and that was it.
And I'm just kind of curious why you decided to, because we have like a Facebook chat we talk to with basically us and all our other podcast buddies, and I think, I don't know, me, Matt, Tom, like, us kaiju guys brought up Gorgo, and then like that led to you like just going on Amazon and buying the Blu-ray within like 5 minutes, and
yep.
Somehow one of us, it might have even been you, mentioned like doing it for the Graveyard. So what is your like why this movie, and like what is your like what is there some kind of attachment that you have to this film?
Yeah, for sure. I was going to go around and ask everybody how they became acquainted with this film. So basically, yeah, for me, this is pretty much the kaiju that, I believe it or not, I've probably seen the most, growing up or whatever. And basically, it just came from, this movie came out in 1961. So when this movie came out, my dad was a kid, and he was taken to this film. So my dad always had my dad's number one thing was always giant monsters, like not like really anything, like he saw, in theaters, like a lot of the old Ray Harryhausen stuff, and like really just like the Americanized stuff. And this is actually like a British movie, but yeah, he saw a lot of that stuff, and he was like one of the few people who loves giant monsters that's actually like wasn't obsessed with Godzilla, like in directly general. Just he was just any giant monster he loved. And so it basically just came down to, like many great films, also a similar one would be like Valley of the Gwangi. When the, I guess, 90s rolled around and Suncoast Video rolled around, we would go looking for my dad's favorite movies as a kid, and we would buy them on VHS for usually whatever they were back then, $15, $20, whatever. And Gorgo was one of those. So I was rocking Gorgo probably from the time I was like 13, I'd say, roughly around 12, 13, and we owned the cassette, and I watched this, I want to say at least probably 4 or 5 times throughout the years, also with the Valley of the Gwangi, because there was just a long period of time where, before DVD, like my movie collection was literally about only about 20 tapes, really. and we didn't have cable for a pretty long stretch. So I would watch these movies, and Gorgo, like, yeah, like even as like a whatever 12-year-old, you know, in the late 80s, early 90s, whenever we bought the tape, like, the shit was rocking for me. Like, it didn't really seem campy to me. Like, it totally worked as a movie to me. I enjoyed it. So Gorgo has always, you know, had a soft spot in my heart from just being a movie that my dad shared with me. He loved as a kid. I loved it. You know, the final destruction scene, I think, is one of the best, you know, especially of the older movies. So that's how I got into it. Byrd, how did you come across Gorgo?
Unfortunately, I don't. My story isn't as personal or intimate as yours. For me, it was just growing up when I was younger, and really just kind of getting into these monster movies. I mean, Godzilla is what really got me there, and I got there from just being a kid into dinosaurs. But so it was Godzilla and King Kong, and then after that, I mean, pre-internet, and, you know, with, you know, some magazines, really, and, you know, whatever kind of literature from the library you could get your hands on, that's what made you aware of movies. We're looking at some very strange-looking dead fish.
Are these
right
anything
now.
like...
I was gonna say this, and like I'm wondering if this was meant, but these rubber fake like prehistoric fish that they're finding in the ocean, because the movie basically starts out with there's some kind of underwater explosion or something that messes up these guys like giant ship, and I was gonna say, like, no joking, those rubber fish, those weird prehistoric fish they found, it looked like the fish that Luke Skywalker caught in The Last Jedi. Did you guys pick that up? No, I'm serious.
I can see that.
Yeah, it looked, because where he spearfishes, it looked like one of those fishes.
It's weird. No one ever talks about there being like these weird fictional fish being in this.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Anyway, so yeah, I mean, once you exhausted the Godzillas, the King Kongs, even the Gameras. Although I think I might have seen Gorgo before I saw any Gameras. Maybe before I saw all the Gameras, that's for sure. And going to the video store, and, you know, there it is, Gorgo, a giant monster on the loose, and, you know, so you rent it, and it's another one to watch over and over. My real appreciation for the movie didn't come until a little later. It wasn't one of my favorites as a kid, but I've really grown to like it quite a bit. Yeah, I mean, I have a lot of history and factoids about this movie that I'm excited to get into with you guys. But
we're getting acquainted here with this kid is one creepy little fuck. I'm sorry. He answers the door like, "Where's your dad?" "I don't have a father." And, you know, he's an 8-year-old kid. He works for the archaeologist who's also the harbor master. This kid is shady as shit, and we're going to see that develop throughout the course of this movie.
I don't think we ever learn where his parents are.
Just keep your eyes on this kid.
Them.
He is shady.
He gets like passed around. We should say for people who maybe, you know, haven't seen this in a while or something. Basically, it starts out, this giant ship gets messed up, and, you know, they need a dock to make repairs, and so you have like the two main characters, which is like the captain of the ship and his best friend. I think it's like Joe and Sam. So they go to this harbor.
They're scavengers, They run like a salvage ship.
So they go to this harbor to make repairs, and they found there's an archaeologist who's, like, you know, basically raiding the local, like, you know, like, just basically, like, not really pirate treasure, but it kind of is pirate treasure or Viking treasure in this area. Just pretty much, he's got all these local townies combing the sea bottom, and I guess probably on land as well, and he's just stockpiling these artifacts that obviously are worth a lot of money. And he just has this little boy with him who's like his manservant or something. And the kid has like I guess like life is cheap here or something, because the kid's got like no parents, and the guys from the ship, they can't get any help from the archaeologist, who, like Jelly said, is also the harbor master. He basically just tells them, like, you know, you can't be here, you need a permit or some bullshit, and makes up this excuse. Basically tells them to kick rocks, even though their ship really can't be out on the sea yet. So it's a pretty bizarre setup, and I think if you're not if you're not kind of like you know, more familiar with older kind of slower paced movies, like the beginning of this movie might throw you off a little bit because you kind of don't know who the main characters are and who the good guys are in the beginning, is what I felt like, you know, watching this.
Are there good guys in this movie?
I mean, there's some people that are better than others.
Yeah, the kid, maybe. Because the kid's the only one who's, like, not out for some greedy monetary purpose, you know?
You have one guy that eventually feels bad about it, if that counts.
For me, with this movie, it's funny because like, believe it or not, this is, you know, maybe the kaiju movie I've seen the most. I believe it because this movie was on cable more than any other like kaiju movie.
This movie was on all the time. TNT ran the hell out of this thing.
Yeah, this movie was on TV all the time, and that's where I saw it. I mean, I never actually even saw it all the way through from like beginning to end until I bought the Blu-ray, because it was just one of those movies that was just always on TV, and you always picked it up, you know. It seemed like for me, I always picked it up during like the scene where they're parading Gorgo through downtown London, and you know, then from there, as a kid, obviously you're hooked because giant monster, what?
Right.
But like, yeah, it's just one of those movies that just was always on all the time, and yeah, that's just I don't have like that personal connection to it or anything, but just. I do kind of feel like I remember my grandfather must have really liked this movie because he is the person who bought me a few of my Godzilla movies, and this movie seemed to be always on at his house.
You know, this movie is really well known, especially among probably like baby boomers, probably people that are like our parents' age. Like anytime I meet an older person, probably like 50 and up, and they find out I like Godzilla, they always ask me if I've seen Gorgo.
Mm. Well, I think probably that, you know, I mean, you guys, and, you know, you guys in particular, you guys are huge Godzilla fans. You have no qualms about really dipping into foreign cinema in general, not just kaiju movies, but just other movies too. But I think maybe a reason why this movie was so marketable, and maybe like how Jelly said, why it was so on cable so much, maybe it's just because, you know, there's really no like translation barrier here. Like it's an English language movie. I mean, like they do think, you know, London and I think it was Dublin and all that where they shot over there. But people don't really have, I mean, unless they were like dubbed after the fact, people don't really have like strong accents in this movie at all.
Right. It's interesting you mentioned that. I mean, well, I don't know. I could use that as a segue into the kind of strange origins of Gorgo.
Yeah, talk about Gorgo, because we're just at like we're still pretty much at the spot where they're just stuck because their ship is messed up. And I just
want to say if you got the Blu-ray for this, if you're watching on the Blu-ray and you're wondering, you know, because at some point I'm sure, well, it'll be right now. I mentioned that this Blu-ray actually is like pretty good, and it is a massive, massive improvement over any other print of this movie you've ever seen. Believe me, this is the worst looking scene. It's murky. It's hard to see what's going on. But if you've seen any other print of this movie ever, it's 10 times worse than this.
Go on Netflix right now and watch the Mystery Science Theater episode and come back to us.
Yeah. Which, I mean, I love Mystery Science Theater. I'm a big fan, but I would, if you haven't seen Gorgo yet, I would, if there's some way you can, try to like see like the real legit version of the movie, you know?
But so Byrd, tell us about the origins of Gorgo.
All right. Well, you know, for as well known as this movie is, I think that its importance to just giant monsters cinema has almost been, I don't want to say ignored, but it's not talked about now the further time gets by it. But let's keep things in perspective. 1961, as far as real giant monster rampage movies, there were 2 Godzilla movies in existence, 2 Kong movies, and then you had
Rodan.
Rodan. The only other real big players were the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, the Harryhausen movie, which that led to a Japanese ripoff called Godzilla, which was game changing in its own. And then that leads into the Giant Behemoth, the Willis O'Brien movie, and then there's a couple other things, some giant insect movies, but that was really it. That's probably less than 10 movies, really. The Lost World, that's more in the dinosaur movies, but regardless, it wasn't really a genre yet. And it's interesting to see just how much stuff from this movie was adopted by everyone, the Japanese, by everyone, Steven Spielberg even. But to kind of backtrack into just why this movie exists, this was produced by the King brothers, who didn't do too much. They probably have something like 50 credits, but they were really kind of your typical cheapo, demanding movie producers. And they put out the English version of Rodan, which was a hit for them, and they wanted to make another giant monster movie. And this was actually, and this is why I said this, there was kind of a segue, Goat, when you mentioned this being English language. There's Baby Gorgo.
Yeah, we think it's just Gorgo at this point. We don't even know it's Baby. Yeah, we don't even know it's Baby Gorgo.
Which I'm gonna diverge real quickly just to say I love the monster.
Oh,
I love the design. I love the suit. I love the flapping ears, the red eyes.
It's a good
I think
roar too.
Yeah, and I think this scene, before this Blu-ray came out, was garbage, but I'm watching it the way it's supposed to be. It's actually a pretty atmospheric and kind of spooky scene in a way.
Yeah, it is.
But anyway, you were talking about how this was an English movie, but originally this was going to be a co-production with the Japanese, and the movie was going to be set in Japan. It hasn't been said anywhere, but I don't think it's a reach to say that Toho may have been the Japanese co-producer. That what studio they were in talks with is unknown, but that's kind of the common theory because they had success with the American version of Rodan. But anyway,
they were the only ones even. Toho was the only ones even doing this at the time,
right? But the Japanese funding fell through, which is, any other co-production. On the Japanese end, it's usually the Western side that falls through, and they pick up the slack. But the King brothers, they wanted their dinosaur movie, it ended up being a British film, directed by Eugene Laurier, who is another person that he only directed a handful of movies, but he's really one of the architects of this genre because he directed The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And then he did The Giant Behemoth, and then he did Gorgo. And the only other movie he directed was a movie about this bionic giant called Colossus of New York, and some TV stuff. He was mostly a art designer, Oscar nominated, in fact. So he knew how to make a movie look good. And this was kind of them being like, well, instead of stop motion, why don't we do this thing the Japanese have been doing with these elaborate miniatures and suits? And sure enough, that was Gorgo. Now, I think he kind of brought the basic idea to Gorgo. I think the King brothers just told him, like, hey, make a dinosaur movie. But something that stuck with him was when he showed his daughter, who was a young kid at the time, when they went and saw The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, which he directed. She cried at the end of the movie and yelled at her dad. Why did you kill the monster? Why you were mean to the monster? Why did you do that? And he promised her, he was like, one day I'll make a movie like this for kids. So Gorgo is kind of conceived as a kid's version of the Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. And then that's where the storyline of, them capturing a creature, and it turns out it's a baby, and then there's the relationship with the parent monster. And from what I understand, the King brothers took to that because they were close to their own mother. And that's the origin of Gorgo. And if you look at this, you can see not only in the special effects department, but this kind of first act is when we're told about the legend of Ogra the sea serpent is a little bit similar to, because they're on this this island, this small island, this fishing community, and they talk about Ogra the sea serpent being like their guardian. It's very kind of Odo Island and Godzilla. But yeah, you look at the things that this movie did that would later be adopted. I mean, the baby monster getting captured and the parent coming after it has been done a million times after this. With Gappa is probably the most notable one. That's Nikatsu's kaiju, one and only kaiju movie from the Showa period, made by people who claim not to have never seen Gorgo. Tom, you've seen Gappa. Do you believe that?
No, not even at all.
Yeah, I was gonna say that was the thing that was interesting to me was as much as this film kind of borrows from both the design of Godzilla, like I love the design, and it was the ears that sold me on it when I was a kid, like that made it distinctive. Yeah. But it's like, it's kind of like, but I mean, I think a lot of just average, like not fans or whatever, just people who just glance at Godzilla and glance at Gorgo, they probably would say, Gorgo is a ripoff of Godzilla or whatever. But yeah. I like it because it's just kind of like a cool amalgamation of the Godzilla type creature, but kind of more with the King Kong storyline. And then, like you said, bringing in the baby version, which would be like copied so much later, like, as much as it borrows from those other films, it also kind of has its own spin and its own contribution to the genre at the same time.
Yeah, no, I mean, this movie really did kind of introduce a lot of the tropes that we would see later. Not just the stuff with the baby. Speaking of the Japanese connection, this movie actually opened in Japan before it opened anywhere else.
Wow.
And I have to wonder. I mean, this is speculation. I mean, some of this stuff, it's impossible. Everyone that worked on it's dead. You're never going to know. But this predates Mothra by a good 6 months. And just knowing how quick Toho made those movies back in the day, I do wonder if maybe this movie had an influence on the element of... because Mothra is kind of the same. They take like the small fairies.
Of it.
Yeah, these greedy entrepreneurs take these fairies off of an island, and Mothra comes and saves them. I mean, I'm not sure. That's just more spitballing, but
I mean, anything's possible because like people don't understand. Back then, they would remake movies that had literally came out 1 or 2 years previously. So for Toho to crank out a movie 6 months later, I mean, it's possible,
Yeah, I mean...
They did it twice within the first 5 Godzilla movies.
Right. Well, Ghidorah, which was probably their most ambitious kaiju movie when it was made, was the third and last kaiju movie that Toho did with the same director, same effects crew, all within a year. So, I mean, those guys worked fast back in the day. But, yeah, I mean, there's a lot of things like Tsuburaya... once into the 60s, his monsters would have these glowing eyes, which famously, when they die, the eyes would stop glowing. But, Gorgo has the glowing eyes. And then you can see DNA from this movie everywhere. Steven Spielberg, back when I rewatched the Jurassic Park series for Kaiju Transmissions, watching the Lost World features, he's very upfront about saying, the last act of this movie is my homage to Gorgo. Wow. A lot of people that rose to prominence grew up on this movie. John Landis loves this movie. You can see just where Gorgo, even in Godzilla, Godzilla versus Mechagodzilla '93 has the same ending where they walk into the water together. Gamera the Brave. Man, anyone listening, if someone's watching this for the first time with a movie graveyard commentary, they're not watching movies right. Oh, here's a scene that is on any other print of this movie is virtually unwatchable. It's just dark.
You can see it good here.
It's just dark mush. But yeah, here you actually see the monster like kind of trying to bite into the little submersible and all that stuff. And yeah, shots like this you could not see on any other prints.
Yeah, I mean, like I'm saying, like I've seen this movie many times on an old whatever VHS tape. I don't know if it was the Blu-ray quality and everything, be able to see better, but this scene was like either my favorite or second favorite scene of the movie because they basically just put this guy in this really tiny submarine thing on a cable as bait for Gorgo so they can try to catch Gorgo in some nets. And I thought it was a tense scene, man, just the claustrophobia of just like really when that guy first climbed in that thing, how small it was and how he could barely fit in it. And then when he's in there,
can barely breathe. There's no ventilation in those.
And when Gorgo started attacking and the water started spraying in, like I'm serious, it was working as like a good tense scene for me the other night when I was watching it. I loved it, man.
So before Byrd gets going, we got to do our creepy kid counter. So first he told me he has no dad. Yeah. Then he's telling him he's this guy's manservant.
Yeah.
Then they show up on the land after they find the guys who are diving for treasure that the harbor master has, diving for treasure, and he tells them shark ate somebody, and he just says it very nonchalantly, and then he's creeping on these guys as they're having their conversations, and then as the guys are getting ready to leave, he's telling them that you guys are bad and you're doing a bad thing, and then we're about to see him come up here and try and free Gorgo. And also when Gorgo first attacked, he tried to stop everyone from attacking him. So just keep all that in mind. This kid is up to no good.
Well, speaking of the kid, I know we mentioned it earlier, but yeah, I mean, I guarantee, because that was like their key to like, okay, making a kids movie, your audience cipher is going to be the kid. And how many times have we seen that in Japanese kaiju movies?
It's like the entire Gamera series.
Yeah. Oh, and speaking of Gamera, pretty soon we're going to come up on the scene with them parading the monster through the city. Another thing, probably one of the more famous images from this movie, lifted whole sail in Gamera the Brave also. But yeah, I have to wonder if Yuasa, the creator of Gamera, watched this movie at some point. And then more about this, how this movie has legs. We're all John Carpenter fans here. One of his first films as a film student he made a Godzilla versus Gorgo fan film.
Wow.
Yeah, which I don't think has surfaced anywhere. I'm sure John Carpenter would probably prefer it that way, but for guys like us...
Yeah, I'd love to see it. Do you have any idea, like, how did he do it? Did he just use, like, little dolls, or what?
Yeah, it might have just been, like, toys or stop motion or something like that, because I know he's talked about, making little Super 8 films or whatever with toys and stuff when he was younger.
Well, speaking of Godzilla versus Gorgo, because you guys are dyed-in-the-wool Godzilla experts, literally seen every single movie multiple times with Godzilla. Obviously not baby Gorgo here, but like legit daddy or mama Gorgo, whatever it is that shows up at the end. How do you think Gorgo would stand as an opponent for Godzilla? You think it could be a close fight, maybe?
I think it would work.
Gorgo's, the mother Gorgo, which I guess technically is Ogra, she's pretty tough. She withstands military force the same way that Godzilla does, and she's a pissed off mother, which you don't want to get in the way of those.
Yeah, look at this. This kid's trying to free the freaking monster on the ship.
And I gotta say, like this is where like this movie is really like a cut above to me. Like really was shocking me with the budget especially watching it again in the widescreen, Blu-ray edition, everything, was I couldn't believe how good the large prop Gorgos look. Like, you can pretty much just see his head and his arms starting to move underneath the nets there, but I was surprised how, because there's some other spots in the movie later on we'll get to where there are large, either prop feet or which is whatever, and like I was really surprised like how well they did like the large props here.
Yeah, well, that's the really, it's especially at this point in the genre, and God, it's like, especially like where we are now in the genre, it's really unique to have any scenes with a monster or kaiju where they're decently in scale with people. Like, I mean, the baby is, what do they say? Is the baby is like 50 feet tall or something? It might even be shorter than that, right? Like,
I think the closest you got was probably the scenes in King Kong where, like, they have the big head eating the villagers and stuff like that.
But like, you think about like where we are now in this genre, the only thing that has anything that's in that scale at all is the Daimajin movies, where Daimajin is like 25 feet tall or something. But like, and it's really cool as a fan of this genre. If for some reason you are a kaiju fan and you're listening to this and you've never seen Gorgo, like, that's a really unique kind of piece to have in this genre, is something that can interact with people a little bit more on that kind of a scale, and it is a really cool scale too when you're talking about like building some of the miniatures and doing some of the composite shots and things like that. It adds like a different level to kind of looking at the miniatures, because the miniatures that they have to create for a man in a suit who then is only supposed to be 25 feet tall they're this really cool kind of, they got a totally different look to them than a miniature made for something that's supposed to be 300 feet tall. So it's got a really unique flavor to it in that way.
Yeah, and I think it's shocking when you watch this. I mean, other than a lot of the compositing kind of blue screen, green screen type effects, which are obvious, other than just the actual compositing, like, I think it's kind of shocking to me when I watch this again in 2018. And I'm not the type of person who, like, for example, just today, actually, I listened to a podcast, and kind of the theme of it was rewatching movies from your youth and seeing if they hold up. And this one guy just ripped the shit out of the Terminator for literally having the stop motion Terminator at the end. So, like, I'm not the type of person, like, I don't watch old movies expecting them. And this guy was like, for a 2018 whatever perspective, it doesn't work at all and all this shit. Like, I'm not like that at all. I mean, I'm just going in kind
I think that might be one of the most unfair ways to critique a movie.
Right. And like one of the co-hosts was like, "Well, this is like 1984 type effects," and the guy, "That's bullshit. You gotta." But I'm telling you to just going into this with an open mind. Just legitimately, the other night, wanting to rewatch this or whatever, I was shocked by such a large portion of the effects did work. Like, just like,
I love this scene too, that we're seeing. I mean, it really sells the one thing I think this movie does great is the having some sympathy for the monster in a way that you didn't get from King Kong, or I don't know. I mean, even maybe Mighty Joe Young, but just the way this thing is tied down and being paraded through Piccadilly Circus, and this is just this kind of pathetic thing, you know.
Yeah.
I mean, this is really one of the most sympathetic treatments of a monster that we've seen in this genre at the time this was made, and it's made even more interesting by the fact that if you look at similar things, I mean, King Kong is killed, and the Brontosaurus in the Lost World, I mean, he has no island to go back to because it is destroyed. Gorgo can go back home. You know, and I think that's a crucial part in just how this kind of had a different flavor than a lot of those other movies. Mm-hmm. And to your point, Goat, about the guy that was bashing Terminator, it is important to keep things in perspective, because you can look at a movie like Gorgo or The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, or whatever. I mean, I would largely point to, okay, Beast from 20,000 Fathoms. Someone might look at it and be like, well, it's not as good as Gojira. And it's like, well, no, but for the time when there was no Godzilla, I mean, it was amazing. Godzilla did a lot of things that movie did, but did it better. But whatever, I mean, we've seen movies come after this that did it better, but I mean, you really have to, I don't know, there is something to putting yourself in the shoes of someone that would have seen this in 1961, and you do have to kind of keep a balance between that and how it holds up. But I mean,
well, I'm just
it's hard. It's too easy to be hard on old movies.
I always try to judge things based on how they look for their time, right? And I think for a lot of people, it's tough to put this movie into context, because in a way, it doesn't, to me, feel like a movie from 1960, you're talking about, this is like damn near the advent of color in film, color films were the norm by this point, but this was the point where they became the norm. You still had black and white movies like up until the late 50s. So, this is you're talking about the advent of color, essentially. You're talking about like blue screen as a technology was like kind of a new thing, especially in trying to meld it into color film.
I don't even know.
Very
how they
few
the
companies
blue screen
did
off
very few companies. They said, I think it was before King Kong versus Godzilla. It might have been before Mothra versus Godzilla. E.G. Tsuburaya, who did all the effects for the Godzilla movies, did like a furlough or a trip or whatever to America to see if he could come up with any ideas for things. And he said like the only real thing he came back with was like this super expensive optical printer that he wanted to get, because it was the only way to make blue screen effects look halfway decent. And he didn't discover the existence of that thing until like the mid 60s. So when you think about this movie being made, it was released in 1961, but it was made in 1960. A lot of what this movie is doing is they're forging their way. They're the first people doing some of this stuff. So you have to keep that kind of stuff in mind. Like you go back and rewatch Jurassic Park, just for example, and that scene with the Brontosaurus, which is the first scene that you see of CGI, kind of the only reason that scene works these days is because of the score, the atmosphere, the emotion surrounding it. But if you actually watch the CG, it's not great, right?
Yeah, like the really actors sell that, really.
But But for 1993, I mean that shit blew our minds.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So you have to kind of realize that even though everyone in 1960 probably thought knew it was effects or whatever, it just blew their minds to see this because they have no idea how it's being done.
Yeah. And I mean that was always that was a challenge probably up until stuff like Star Wars, really the blue screen stuff. Like even by the time Tsuburaya had that optical printer, which I don't want to. I'm not going to promise this is true, but I believe from memory that the first movie he used it on was Matango, which was 1963. But even then, only he and Walt Disney even owned that thing. They were the only people using that high caliber of a printer. And then, I think like by the time ILM really got rolling, I think they're the ones that really kind of figured it out. And in 2001, I mean, movies like that. Speaking of 2001, this movie has special effects by a guy named Tom Howard, who went on to do a lot of stuff. 2001, Tom Thumb, Where Eagles Dare. So that's, again, you had a good crew on this movie. It's low budget and quick as it It was.
Yeah, and I gotta say, like, I'll just say it, like, for me, it was kind of, for whatever effects, like, like the blue screen or whatever, for whatever effects they don't quite pull off, I was, like, I think more entertained by the ones that they do pull off really, really well, just because in this day and age, it's refreshing to see because and that's the thing, this ain't like some of the old or whatever monster movies where you barely see the monster. Like you get to see Gorgo like a whole lot in this, like wreaking havoc, doing stuff, and it's just refreshing to see something that actually in the year 2018 actually isn't CGI. It just has a different feel, it has a different flavor. It's not, I mean, in my mind, just being a movie fan, it's not really about what looks fake and what looks real and whatever, but it's like what really is a quote-unquote special effect, you know what I mean? And what is, kind of makes this movie different than, like, a movie you would see now, And one thing that I think some of these older monster films really, really do well is, they focus on scenes that a modern movie wouldn't, because a modern movie would just show as much CGI as you can. Like, I just love the scenes that really are all about the satire of society, like how they did that montage of all the buses going around London with Gorgo ads on them and all the people watching him be parade around the city and whatever. And like this movie does actually a really good job of satiring and really showing like how like the people are like cruel, you know what I mean, and just exploiting nature, and how many scenes like the guys from the ship who captured Gorgo, like, maybe we can get this offer, maybe we can get that. Like, they're making money hand over fist now when they get the Gorgo circus set up and everything. So
yeah, that's a good segue into talking about. We've gotten 40 minutes into this movie and we haven't talked about what a scud main character is.
Yeah, yeah.
This guy is not a good person. Right at the beginning of the movie, he's trying to salvage stuff, and they're like, his shipmates and everyone are like that water over there. I've been sailing for my entire life. I've never seen anything like that. That's like right before the volcano erupts and destroys their ship, and they're like, we should get out of here. He's like, no, I could get a couple $100 off of the stuff at the ship, and they're like, oh, okay, I guess you're willing to let people die for that, Then he tries to exploit the harbor master. He's like, yeah, we'll take care of Gorgo for you, and we'll take some of the treasure that you found as a down payment. And the guy's like, how are you going to take care of him? He's like, yeah, I'll give you some of the treasure if you take care of him. And they're like, good, give it to us. And he's like, yeah, okay, here. And they're like, nah, we'll figure it out later. Like, he's always trying to huckster money out of people, and like, people are dying in his wake, and he's like, yeah, I'm sorry about it or whatever.
Yeah,
but he does not care.
Yeah, every time they have to transport Gorgo or fuck around with Gorgo or do something, one or two guys just get accidentally killed. And it's not even because the monster is like so mean and eating people. It's just like the last guy got killed. He just accidentally got swiped by the tail because that's, they were using flamethrowers to, corral Gorgo back into his pen and all that shit. And it wasn't even Gorgo or baby Gorgo's fault. He was turning direction, caught that dude on the tail, and yeah, he's like, the other guy's like, yeah, that guy had a wife and kids, and he's like, so what? We'll send him some money, whatever. It's just like I said, it does a good job with like the satire. Like, there actually is a real story. Like, the movie kind of starts out as like this adventure on the high seas, international, whatever, type of adventure movie. You until Gorgo shows up, you kind of don't really know like exactly where it's going and stuff. But yeah, just the way they evolved this, like, this is some real storytelling, some real direction, and like we said, this only being a 76-minute movie, they kind of get the story out in a very economical but very like entertaining fashion. Like, there's not too much exposition, like, really.
We just had the big twist, which where the scientist revealed in his comically oversized book that that Gorgo is actually a baby and there is a mother out there, which
creepy ass kid again.
Just watching Gorgo electrocute himself.
Yeah. I gotta say that's one of my favorite scenes too. I just love the sadness and the despair of the little kid. At night, the circus is closed. He's just watching Gorgo meander around the pen and bump into the electrified fence and shit.
And then here we have Mom Gorgo. I like these night scenes on the island. I just think they're very atmospheric. But yeah, that twist I just want to mention. I mean, it's become kind of a trope now, as we talked about. But when people saw this movie and had no idea that was coming, that had to have been quite an exciting reveal.
Yeah. Well, yeah, another thing too, if you're just watching this movie for the first time and they got baby Gorgo, he's in the circus, it's sad, all that kind of shit, like, you're kind of like, okay, like, where do we go now from here? You know what I mean? Because, like, it kind of seems like the movie's kind of almost over. Like, there seems like nothing else could really happen,
That's a great twist, though. I mean, it's become so famous, but
it's a twist that's been used in other movies now. I mean...
Well, I talked about Spielberg and The Lost World, Jurassic Park earlier.
Well, yeah, but I mean, we knew there were giant T-Rexes in that movie. I'm saying...
Oh, well,
This, I mean, Jaws 3, I could think of, for example, where, they think they got the shark, but then the mother turns out to be, like, that comically huge shark. Another one is The Meg, just came out. Yep. So yeah, it's a twist that's I don't know. I can't well, actually, I can think of one other movie that did it before this, and it's Rodan, where Rodan has the little insects that are like causing trouble in the mine that are killing things, and you're like, oh my god, those things are really bad, and then the twist reveal that they are the food for.
Even then, I don't know if anyone saw that thinking those were Rodan. I don't know. I mean, maybe, but I don't think so. So we're in now that we're in a little bit of a lull where they're just kind of trying to find the mother and before it reaches land. But to get back to the greedy entrepreneur characters. It's interesting. That's an element that the director Laurier, he did not want that.
Really?
Yeah, the original script, the main characters were actually much more likable. They weren't these like scavenger kind of sea guys. They were pearl divers. And it was the King brothers that wanted it rewritten to have these greedy kind of hucksters be behind it. Now we're kind of getting into some military stuff too, because they're about to the Navy is about to bomb the mother, but he was also opposed to having military battle with the creature because he was
because I read he even bought a print of the movie and cut this scene out.
He really didn't want that. He was like, well, the creature would die, and I don't know. I think in general he wanted the movie to be a lot more of a humanist piece than what it is. But yeah, the King brothers really wanted all this military stuff. They probably wanted to compete with with the Godzilla kind of formula a little more, and I think he had something a little different in mind.
Well, if you were saying that they distributed Rodan, I mean.
And Rodan made them a lot of money.
Yeah, that's what they wanted then.
I really like this movie the way it is, though. I like it that there's not anybody who's like really too... I mean, the one guy from the ship, he does have a conscience at a point,
Yeah.
But I kind of like it the way it's set up now, and then also just like the way the military is just like has no qualms about we'll wipe these creatures out. It's a nuisance. We'll take care of it. Whatever. I like the movie the way it is because I actually really like the sympathetic character, the hero character of it being the monsters. Really,
Well, I mean, when like I said, I mean, the seed of this movie was born out of his daughter crying at the end of a movie he made, The Beast from 20,000 Fathoms, and I'll make a version for you. I you this genre is always tricky with human characters because at their best, you have movies, you have a decent handful that have great human characters, human drama, but a lot of them, even some of the best ones, are very bare bones. And I think the more they get into being for kids, I think the more, studios that make these movies, they know, kids want the monster. The monster is who the target audience is going to identify with. Kids love monsters. Kids identify with monsters. Kids feel understood the same way monsters feel misunderstood. So I think the King brothers knew that. And I think they were like, the main character of this movie is Gorgo. It's not these schmucks.
Right. That'd be like saying, like, in 1998, everybody was like, man, if we could only really get a film going that has Matthew Broderick as a great paleontologist. That's what people want to see and identify with. And, in a way, Roland Emmerich actually kind of made that movie because the baby Godzillas were like, just terrible things that they wanted to destroy, I like shots like this of like the dirty circus grounds. I gotta say, Mike, I'm telling you, this movie, the atmosphere, the shots, like this is not a schlock fest. Like it tells a good story. I thought.
I agree that this movie was actually the first time I really felt like I was like, it's a decent episode. It's funny, but when I remember when the Mystery Science Theater episode was on, I was like, really, Gorgo? I feel like that's too like good for them. Yeah. I think Trev disagrees, but whatever. He's a MST super fan, but
really, he sold out Gorgo just to jerk off to about the satellite of love. Yeah, because when I'm sorry, but if you think Gorgo like belongs in the same category as Manos, Hands of Fate,
right?
Yeah, come on.
What's interesting is I remember I actually taped. I probably still have the tape. I had a VHS. My original copy of Gorgo was VHS of this taped off of AMC when it was American Movie Classics. Not the AMC that it became.
Before it was the all Walking Dead.
Right.
Dead
and I had space on that tape afterwards, and then I remember when the Mystery Science Theater episode aired, and I have that tape somewhere. It's the movie, and then after that, on the same tape is the MST episode. But the only reason I say that is because that's really strange because the MST episode only aired. It only aired twice, both in the same day. And it had to be pulled because I guess there was some kind of copyright thing with this movie. And I think that episode ended up on DVD, and I know it's on Netflix right now. Also, eagle-eyed viewers will notice some of this military stock footage was also used in the American cut of Rodan, again, from the King brothers. But yes, that I just, it was so, when I found that out, it was just so strange that I caught this one of two broadcasts of that episode and taped it. Yeah.
Where did we come up? There's a did we already pass it? The really sweaty guy who's behind the control panel. It's just a funny shot to me. It's just really just this guy that like fire number 2, and he's like he looks miserable.
Yeah, I think that was.
It's like, is that Lloyd Bridges in Airplane? Like
depth charges everything.
Yeah, this is I know it's a lot of stock footage and everything, but it's still pretty like
it's cut together in an exciting way. I'll give them that.
Yeah.
Hey, Godzilla has a scene very similar to this that's also stock footage, so I'm not going to be too crazy here. But since we are just watching stock footage, we're at a kind of another lull in the story. This movie made MGM and the King brothers a lot of money, and Gorgo had a kind of strange afterlife with comic book tie-ins and things like that. Goat, have you seen any of the comic book stuff?
Just
there he is.
Oh, there he is.
Yeah, there's a sweaty guy. Yeah.
He got to take his
swimming.
Was his shirt off?
Yeah, it was.
Yeah.
He was like
Jeez,
in the submarine firing.
Yeah, that guy was
naked.
burning up so bad he had to take his clothes off.
I mean, you would too. There's probably hardly any air down there. Yeah, I just saw like pictures of the covers and stuff. Gorgo versus a spaceship and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, the comics were crazy. They were put out by Charlton Comics. I think the comics are technically public domain, so you can find them online very easily. But IDW did put out a compendium of these, and I bring it up, Goat, because I know you're a big Spider-Man fan, and those comics were Steve Ditko drew the Gorgo comic, and he also did a comics for Charlton based on Konga, which was a British kind of King Kong knockoff, and Charlton also did Reptilicus comics.
Really?
And so so those three are kind of referred to as like the Charlton monsters. IDW reprinted the Gorgo and Congo ones. They were crazy. Like they would have Gorgo fighting like aliens and your dinosaurs and it's the 60s, so communists at one point. Charlton ended up having to change the name of Reptilicus to Reptosaurus because of some kind of copyright thing. But Reptilicus, under the name Reptosaurus, actually cameos in a Gorgo comic as well. There were a lot of those, and then there was a mini series.
Gorgo was used in a Marvel comic too at one point, and then they had to change the name.
Yeah, there was
Did they change it to Gorga? Like something where it was
Gorga. It was I think it was a Spider-Man comic where Captain Universe made giant versions of toys based on Gorgo and Konga, which was probably like whoever wrote that issue, it was probably their homage to the Charlton monster comics. And they would like attack the city or whatever, and they had to change Gorgo's name, but I mean it's definitely a nod to Gorgo.
I gotta point out this scene's awesome here because like Gorgo is like kind of reaching the outskirts of London, like the docks, so the army and everything, like they pretty much catch everything on fire to try to deter Gorgo. And like on one of the wharfs, there's like a gang of young toughs. One of them looks like a James Dean wannabe, and that are just admiring all this Gorgo action, and just everything catches on fire, and the kids actually like all get burned up. I just thought it was funny that like amongst like all the collateral damage of all the whatever they are, the National Guard and the cops and the whatever, like they just throw in like some young toughs who happen to be at the wrong place at the wrong time. Got burned up.
Speaking of weird Gorgo stuff and tie-ins, there was also a novelization which was I forget the name of the publisher, Maverick maybe, I don't know, but coincidentally they also did novelizations of Reptilicus and Konga. And the interesting thing about these is like these were basically like kids creature features, and these novelizations are beefed up with these graphic sex scenes.
What?
And and nobody that's read them can seem to figure out why. The interesting thing about
who are the females that they're having sex with? Because this movie
that's
has no women characters at all.
Right. Well, the interesting thing about the Gorgo novelization is that it created a female character just for the male lead to sleep with. And my friend Kevin, who runs the blog Mazer Patrol, he put out a book called Kaiju for Hipsters. There's a chapter on Gorgo that kind of gets into the novelization, and apparently this female character, all she does is just have sex with the men, and anytime she's on the page, it just slows down the narrative, and she literally adds nothing to the story. And it's just very strange that a novelization for a kids movie would create a character just to have sex with people.
It takes like a story that's supposed to be like a science fiction monster whole theme, and just basically turns all the monster stuff as background noise to a softcore porn story is pretty much what it does, it sounds like.
Right. And apparently they're pretty graphic scenes also.
I gotta say, I do love like the composited in scenes of just the reporter who's giving play-by-play of how the army is faring against Gorgo and stuff here. Yeah. It's pretty fun.
That's a very Godzilla element there, and it's crazy to think we're already coming into the final showdown, I mean, that's why I just love the brevity of old genre movies, whether it's something like this or Universal horror or whatever. I mean, like, even if you get one of those cheap, like, horror classic box sets and it's just all these old B movies that or these like super cheapies that starred Bela Lugosi, and it's like, you know what, even if it's bad, I'll pop it in and it's an hour of my life.
Yeah, it's like an hour. It's like an hour and 9 minutes.
Yeah, like, I mean, right here, Gorgo's destroying bridges, got some great model work. Like, this is what we want. Get to it. I'm tired of...
This is some great...
Yeah.
This is great.
I love... this is a great set that they're on right now. This is just great stuff. This is my bread and butter here.
Yeah, it's really good. And, like, this is what we want to see when we see these movies. Now, anything with the sci-fi premise, with the you know, an A-list picture, but with the B premise, now you go to see it, 2.5 hours, 40-minute CGI final fight. Like, we don't need that in these films. Like,
yeah, I mean, as much as I've enjoyed plenty of, you know, the recent monster movies that are done in CG, I mean, nothing beats look at the set. Look at this set. Just look at it. I mean, nothing just beats the visual aesthetic of looking at this stuff, which is why I understand. Don't get me wrong, I'm excited for the new Godzilla movie that Michael Dougherty is doing, but you know, I know it's not going to have this. So it's not going to have the. It's just, for me, it's never going to click for me as well as some of these old movies because of it.
Because I mean, this movie. You know, and you know, also, I guess guys like us, we don't really care about how new or old a movie is. We just care about if it's going to deliver the goods of what we see when we put a movie on, you know. And it's like, all that shit of destroying that bridge, they could have, like, condensed that. They could have just had them make one hole in the bridge and walk through. But, like, we wanted to see them tear all that shit down and the guys fall into the water and get destroyed. We want to see all of it, you know.
And something that this movie takes in adopting these kind of Japanese effects methods is, I mean, the Japanese, they didn't care so much about realism like us Americans. Like, there's a very famous, at this point, story. There's a scene in the movie Frankenstein Conquers the World, which is Toho's movie about a giant Frankenstein fighting Baragon, who showed up in the Godzilla films. But there's a scene where Baragon is like rampaging through like
the hillside.
And he comes up on like a farm, and there's a shot of this. It's of Baragon, and in front of him is this really goofy looking horse puppet. And at one point, someone asked Tsuburaya, like, "You're a master of special effects. Why didn't you just composite footage of a real horse into the scene?" And he said, "Well, that would be boring. You know, I want it's the visual."
He wants like a hyper real, like,
it's not about realism. That's the Japanese, the tokusatsu, the suitmation philosophy, right?
Yeah. There's kind of an intentional artificiality to it. That I think for the Japanese, they get it from things like, you know, their old school like puppet theater and stuff like that. Oh, we just saw the excellent Big Ben miniature get torn. Probably
it's
the
most
famous.
Something that I wish modern movies would adopt too. Like, these are effects. I know they're effects. You know, like you don't have to try to hide the fact that they're effects. You don't have to try to trick me. And yeah, I mean, to a certain extent, all effects are supposed to be trying to trick the audience. But like, the way you trick the audience is to build your atmosphere and build your story and build your characters. And yeah, I know this movie is light on a couple of those things, but like, you know, you build your atmosphere, you get your score rolling, you do your job as a director, and you whisk the audience away that way. You don't trick the audience by trying to make them think they're looking at something real. Like, that's always been my, like, I always have known that thing. Like, I mean, ever since I was probably older than 5, you know, I've known that stuff in movies is not real, and that it's
they're going to reuse
trick.
This shot about 500 times.
Trying to, you know, that's the one thing that I like about practical effects versus CGI is like trying to figure out how they did something, and even if you end up knowing how they did something, to know like, they had figure out how to do that versus like they just typed a bunch of shit into it. Here's something.
I like when, even now, I like when filmmakers still like won't explain everything. Like The Thing, like there's some things Rob Bottin just won't tell you how he did,
right.
And I love that. Same with like in Eraserhead, there's the baby, and David Lynch, he won't tell you what it is. It's like, okay, I think it's kind of an open secret that I think it was an aborted lamb fetus or something, but he's like, I don't want to tell you what that thing is.
Yeah. So here's though what I really like. What I really like about this.
Okay, this is the shot they're going to reuse.
They're reusing the shot over and over. Creepy kid alert! Careful, everyone else is running for their lives, and this kid is gleefully watching Gorgo rip the city to shreds. But
he would be best friends with the kid in the first Gamera movie, because both of those kids are complete sociopaths.
Yeah, I gotta say, I think this is actually really good filmmaking, because you got these like straight up like just like shots of the guy in the suit, right, going through the miniature city, right, and then you hard cut to the straight up people running, and like the crowd scenes are great. How panicked they got! I think this is one of the best movies I've seen, like of people running away.
I was just gonna mention that, Goat. Like, it's
great, and then obviously there's a few shots intercut, which is like, Gorgo, blue screened into the shot with the people in the foreground or whatever. But I gotta say, like, it's just the whole combination of the techniques, and it just, like, it's amazing. Like, that is movie magic right there, that you believe that these people are running from this giant, like, just like the guy who falls off the stairs.
These fuckers are trampling each other over the stairs, and like, that's something that, I mean, even in the Godzilla franchises, Byrd and I love it, right? You don't ever really see like this level of like panic, and
this guy just threw his wife out a window, and then he jumped right after.
Yeah,
that's some 9/11 stuff.
It really is. And I mean, this is 1961. I bet people are traumatized. You never see
this level of panic and claustrophobia among crowds. Like,
I love how up close and kind of handheld the camera work is.
Yeah. And everyone's pushing and shoving each other. At one point, some people get trampled to death. We didn't see it yet. It's the guy who's got the sign that says like the end is near or something. Like,
yeah.
That dude gets trampled to death. Like that is all pretty unique to this movie. I wonder, Guillermo del Toro, if he is a fan of this movie. I mean, I'm sure he probably.
You
is,
even
honestly.
Have to ask.
Let's
be honest.
I wonder if this movie was in his mind at all when he was thinking of the fallout shelters or whatever in Pacific Rim.
I think he was, and you know what else too, Jelly, is I would bet money that Spielberg was directly influenced for his version of the War of the Worlds scenes with the running crowds of people.
With the crowds of people, yeah.
No, this is some good stuff.
Especially right there where the guy and the kid went deeper in the subway tunnel, and then it just all collapsed right behind him, and all those thousands of people they were just standing with just all died instantly. Like, that totally feels like Spielberg's War of the Worlds,
Yeah. Some awkward blue screen, but no, you guys are right in that. I mean, that's the stuff that's going to sell it more than the effects, I think.
Right.
And another guy that I can quote, who ironically, he famously looked at this method of effects as being a little bit lesser than stop motion, but Ray Harryhausen, who was one of the pioneers.
Great shot, by the way.
Oh yeah, Gorgo coming up on Piccadilly Circus and tearing down the Gorgo sign.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, great stuff. Like, that could be a desktop background. But yeah, Harryhausen said, even after seeing how technology has advanced, I prefer stop motion because there's a dreamlike, surreal quality to the movement of the creatures. And again, it's that this stuff. It has an intentional artificiality to it that is there to enhance just the visual appeal and the overall atmosphere. So, yeah, I think a lot of modern movies get too hung up on that stuff.
Yeah, that's why I always wonder if there's like somebody, because I mean, like, and you know, I don't know enough about the financial realities of large scale film production, but I always wonder, like, could you make a Gorgo like with the same effects? Obviously, you know, there you'd have some technological advantages, but could you basically make Gorgo now for like $10 million done practically? You know what I mean? Like, I wonder about that. Like, could you do that? Because
I mean, no one's gonna finance it even at that budget.
yeah, but I'm just saying, like, could you do it? Because if you do like the CGI version of Gorgo now, that's at least $100 million picture, depending on how big you want to scale it up or down. But like I just wonder, could somebody just like use these old effects? And I would think like with, you know, modern compositing techniques, you could even do it better, you know, really.
Well, I that's one of the things, like, even if the movie is going to be crummy, you know, that's one of the things. Oh, here's the repent, the end guy. But yeah, I mean, it's interesting that, you know, you have your Asylums, your sci-fis, even, you know, your modern day Cormans, and they make these creature movies with all CG. And it would be nice to see someone at least try to do it practically. Like, even, and I mean, they were still kind of doing that as early as the 90s with, you know, Carnosaur. And I mean, yeah, the effects in that are worse than this, but, you know, at least someone did it.
Right.
You know, that's. I don't even think Carnosaur effects are bad because of like the technology or whatever they use. I think Carnosaur just probably could have been better if they took more time to do it.
Yeah.
You know?
It's just it is crazy the amount of money that, you know, a modern blockbuster pisses away. Like, I mean, you know, we talk about like realism versus just like escapism and that kind of thing, and like a fucking Rampage spent how many hundreds of thousands of dollars, probably maybe millions, on hiring scientific advisors to tell them how a crocodile would mutate if exposed to fake growth serum. Like, I mean,
you know, those guys got paid basically for. I bet those guys just made up answers. It would do this.
Well, I mean, you have to make it up because they're theoreticizing like a made-up pathogen or whatever. You know what I mean?
And then they had to have ignored that shit that the guy said anyways, because I doubt. Find me a scientist who says that when a wolf grows to be 50 feet tall, it also sprouts wings and quills. Like, I mean. So they hired these guys and then they just ignored them. Like, but like that's this whole like obsession with realism just ends up them pissing money away, you know, instead of just being like, oh, like there's a giant monster, it just exists. They have to come up with like these realistic explanations, you know. It's that whole Byrd and I being involved in a lot of these Godzilla groups and you know, the fandom in general, brush up against it all the time, of people being like, well, how are they going to realistically explain that King Kong, who's 100 feet tall in Skull Island, ends up being able to fight Godzilla? And they're like, they're just going to make him bigger, guys. Like, it's, well, and maybe they won't. Like, maybe they'll hire some scientists to tell them how King Kong can grow.
King Kong, like, I got my degree from Kong University.
In 1962, they made King Kong versus Godzilla, and the last time everyone saw King Kong, he was 25 feet tall, and all of a sudden he's 150 feet tall. Like, they don't explain it; it just is.
Nobody cared back then either.
Yeah.
So a minute ago, we had some rather clumsy daytime stock footage of planes shooting at a nighttime Mother Gorgo, but with an interesting effect that I haven't seen, I don't think, any other giant monster movie, is the explosions were these weird, like, superimposed thing, like
yeah, they're borderline cartoony, like, right?
Yeah, like, what do you guys think of that? It's kind of like strange.
I mean, I can. It kind of reminded me of like Batman. TV show with Adam West, like the bang pow, you know, kind of explosions and graphics. Yeah, so the final plan to, you know, all these rockets and shit couldn't kill Gorgo. They electrified the whole area around where Baby Gorgo was at basically the circus. and they were going to put like 2 million volts to electrify Gorgo, or Mommy Gorgo, and she just pretty much tears through that shit. Like,
yeah. Again, taken right out of Godzilla. It's crazy how much, because this takes from King Kong, Godzilla, Mighty Joe Young, but it really did add enough originality to it that future movies would continue to crib from this.
Yeah. It's crazy to think too, we're talking about like just how popular this movie was, right? And how much of an impact it had, and it actually had this fucking kid. It actually had a life after this, as comics and everything that, it never got a sequel or a remake or anything like that. I mean,
yeah, that is kind of I understand nobody wanting to go back to Reptilicus or Gappa or whatever, but a movie like Gorgo, yeah, it is interesting that, to my knowledge, nobody even proposed a remake, or like at one point a studio had the rights or anything like that. It just kind of was left as is.
Yeah,
I think it was on one of the old Monster Zero boards. Someone made a joke, when they announced Kong was back for Skull Island. Someone was like, "Well, when is the Asylum or someone going to buy the rights to Gorgo?"
I like to end here with the two monsters, the big monster and little monster, like walk off together in the sunset.
Yeah, it's a cool.
Yeah.
And that
cool
image
thing.
has been repeated many times.
But yeah, just not even a sequel either. Like that's. Yeah. I mean, it's not like this. This came in an era where sequels were like. Especially a sequel to something as schlocky. And I know this movie is not actually schlocky, but just in the genre as a whole certainly was schlock at this time. I mean, right. Something as schlocky as this to not get a sequel to, like to be popular, to be successful, and to not even produce like a cheap, like quick turnaround sequel. It's surprising to me. I bet a sequel would not have been good because I don't think they would have put the same kind of money or time into it that they did into this, because that's right. The sequel business in 1960 was all right, how can we make the same movie for half as much money, and
because sequels are always about grossing less and less but trying to slash the budget so you still made a profit.
But it is just crazy that we never got a sequel to this, and that's a little crazy.
Even Gulala got a sequel.
Well,
it was like 40 years later, but it happened.
I was going to ask your guys' opinions on this, like how Byrd was saying, like the kind of legacy and everything to this point, like 2018, whatever. Like, how much of like Gorgo's fame or legacy do you think has been in a way diminished because of the fact that it never got a 1990s or 2000s CGI remake? You know what I mean? Because I feel like for, not just the movie in general to validate the original movie, but just the character in general, I feel like, we reached that kind of saturation point to where if your character wasn't remade, it's not considered one of the greats, probably. You know what I mean?
I don't know. I mean, I definitely think there might be something to said to maybe why this movie isn't as popular with the younger generation. Because, I mean, we're probably the last generation to connect to it because it was on TV a lot and all that. But, because, I mean, you think about it, a lot of these monsters have come back in some capacity. Like I just mentioned Gulala. I mean, Tom, if not maybe you go to know. I mean, even Yongari got a sort of reboot at one point.
I was going to bring that up.
Yeah, and we never even got anything of that caliber for Gorgo. And yeah, I think the closest thing we had was I think it was only a few years ago when IDW reprinted the Steve Ditko comics, and then of course this Blu-ray release, which itself was kind of a happy accident because I think a lot of the elements for this movie were considered lost, and then they found a pretty decent looking negative in a salt mine of all places. Some places these things turn up is weird, but But yeah, it's
a movie
very
that
sweet.
in our fandom, the kaiju fandom, you don't hear much about. And I do think it is because there's no modern version of it.
Yeah.
And now I know a lot of the younger people for sure don't watch or don't like as many of the older movies, and that is what it is. It's fine, whatever. But like people as they get older do kind of peel back more for sure. I mean, you talk to anyone in the kaiju fandom over 30, and their favorite movies are all from the 50s and 60s. But even then, this movie doesn't get brought up too much, and I think it's because, especially now, and the people that are getting into their like 20s and stuff now, there was no modern version of this movie for them to see first to then go, oh well, what was this actually based on?
We had the old Monster Vision airings on TV, and they don't play movie aside from TCM. Movies this old don't get play on TV almost ever. But it is, I mean, so many of the monsters we know and love in this genre have had at least one other movie. I mean, Mighty Joe Young had a remake in the 90s. But yeah, Gorgo was always of the more popular movies, just kind of, once it wasn't on TV anymore, I think it was, I remember when I was younger, this movie was brought up a lot, and that was when I'd read letter sections in G-Fan and stuff like that. Gorgo was talked about, but now it's really just kind of just not ever really mentioned, which is a shame because like we said, this movie established a lot of the tropes that Toho and Daiei and everyone else would end up using later.
Yeah. And I mean honestly, I pretty much created this podcast in general to kind of appeal to people my age, Generation X, to kind of, originally just cover the movies of the 80s, and then later I opened it up to cover the 90s as well. But I've noticed some of the really early, the super early 80s movies are some of our most downloaded, which I would think that would probably even mean that we probably do have a lot of our listeners being even older than Generation X. So, if we, for movies like Gorgo, where all three of us sit here and we're scratching our heads why it's not bigger than whatever, I think definitely we can pick some of these even older gems from the 60s, 70s, even 50s.
Oh yeah.
But, I think we can definitely go back in time and, one thing in general, too, I would really love to, at some point in the future, hit up the Universal classic monster films.
Oh, God, well. Get me. I am all over it. Yeah. And I know you mentioned this along with Gwanji a couple times. I'll do a Gwanji, too.
Yeah.
Warner, I just bought the Warner Archive Blu-ray of that one, so...
Yeah.
All right. But yeah, the sad thing about Gorgo not being popular is that for decades it was really popular. Right. And I think the popularity died off in the 2000s when it didn't have that life on TV. It just didn't.
Which is,
and I hate
too. That. I hate that too.
I used to love tuning into TNT pretty much any day of the week after 10 p.m. and seeing whether it's an old monster movie. They would do kaiju movies, they do Hammer films, they do Universal films, martial arts movies all the time. I hate that. As far as
people
TV,
are like, oh, you could get that now, and they're like, it's on Comet, and you're like, what the hell is Comet? And they're like, it's a streaming channel on your computer. I'm like, I don't flip through streaming channels on my computer. I sit down to I sit down to watch streaming channels on my computer.
It's just I just hate that as far as modern cable, no movies were made before 1989 or whatever.
Well, what's weird too, Byrd, is I remember the days of cable TV. Hardly any of your basic cable channels had movies at all. Not even old ass movies, because the rights to them are expensive. Now I don't care what it is. Every cable channel, no matter what the theme of it is, constantly has movies on. And yeah, like the majority of them now aren't even before the year 2000. And there's like a few channels that kind of show a lot of the super popular shit from the 80s and 90s. But like, yeah, like there on any given time on cable TV, even basic cable, you can flip through and find, granted with commercials and chopped up, but you can find it at any time during the day. Usually about 30 different movies playing.
Yeah.
And none of them are from like, the 60s or 70s. You know what I mean? It's weird.
It's like for modern, for current day cable, it's like it had to be made before, it had to be made after 2000 or be Jurassic Park, Terminator, before 2000, according to modern cable channels, there were like 6 movies.
Yeah, yes. and I mean that's why like I have so much appreciation for Turner Classic Movies. Like they're literally doing something no one is doing. Yeah. And I just remember these movies were always on Sci-Fi or TNT, and even movies that I didn't see until I was older. Like I didn't really get into Hammer movies until I was in college. But I knew the imagery, I knew the titles because of scrolling through Sci-Fi, TNT, USA, and and being aware of them. And now it's just this stuff. It's just become more niche than ever. These old movies. It's really frustrating to me, to be honest.
Yeah, let's be honest, it's terrible. And
you know what? I don't know. Did either of you guys watch that Eli Roth History of Horror thing?
No, not yet.
Yeah, I'm about halfway through it, Byrd.
Okay, have you? If you don't know what I'm gonna say, it's fine. But let me ask you: have you noticed anything strange about it? Maybe the question's too vague.
That it's like mostly just talking about popular shit from.
Well, I'm not gonna lie. I watched all 6 episodes and. Full honest truth, it pissed me off because as far as that series goes, there were no horror movies before Night of the Living Dead at all.
Right.
No mention of Hammer. I mean, any mentions of Universal or Hammer or anything before 1967, forget about it. And it's like so many of the best horror movies are from the 30s, 40s, 50s, 60s. And as far as they were concerned, this is... And like I was talking to Trev, he's like, "Oh, well, I like it. Every generation needs something like that." And it's like, well, if you're gonna call yourself History of Horror, actually tell the fucking history.
Yeah, I think
that's crazy coming from Eli Roth too, who like every time I've heard him talk or anything, like he's a super knowledgeable guy and has an obvious passion for it.
I mean, I wouldn't be surprised if AMC were like, well, let's try to keep it, don't talk about too much stuff that's not in color, basically.
Well, yeah, like there was a funny part of actually not even the History of Horror, but James Cameron's History of Sci-Fi, where all of a sudden this one episode, I think it was like where they're talking about pandemics or something, all of a sudden it became like this like 10-minute infomercial for Walking Dead. Like all of a sudden the sets where people were interviewed didn't look like any of the sets that the other guests had been interviewed. James Cameron was not in this segment. He never, like, on screen, he never uttered one thing about Walking Dead. It's like they slipped in this Walking Dead commercial into James Cameron's World of Science Fiction TV show. Is bizarre. So, I mean, what you're saying, Byrd, about them saying focus on this, don't talk about that, like, I could definitely see that happening.
Yeah, it just irritated me to no end. It's like you're going to do a vampire episode and talk about Bela Lugosi for 5 seconds? Really? Like...
might as well just say Bela Lugosi's dead and call it a
day. just play the Bauhaus song at the end and leave it at
that. Yeah. So yeah, I mean Gorgo. I mean, I think people, heard us talk about it. I mean, pretty much, there's not much more I can say other than like, I think it is a classic movie. Not just because it was like, oh, this was a movie that was popular and influenced or whatever, but it's really, I think it's one of the, high marks of the genre, especially for that time period. That that kind of infancy of kaiju, the 50s, 60s, 70s. I think it really is up there.
Yeah, it was a big stepping stone.
Yeah.
Yeah, I like Gorgo. It's brisk too, man. I mean, we've talked so much longer after it's been over because the movie just flies by.
It does. So thank you so much, all listeners, for tuning in. If you happen to have, because we have a lot of people who just kind of tune in to certain episodes, just based on what the movie is we're talking about. So if you came here because you're a kaiju fan, definitely get on over to the Kaiju Transmissions, where Byrd is. How many years has Kaiju Transmissions been going solid now, Byrd? Going on his third year?
About 2.5.
Yeah, almost going on third year.
Yeah, this was the third October that I did with them.
Yeah, and you're almost like close. You're almost like an uncertified third host over there, Jelly. So you definitely.
I try to be.
Yeah, you've definitely been flexing your kaiju muscles as well.
He pretty much has an October residency there because he's always on our Halloween.
Jelly's October residency. Kaiju Chamber. He's spinning the hits every October. Kaiju Transmissions. So and obviously I want to thank you guys for not only coming on and sharing the kaiju knowledge and filling in the gaps and everything. I'm just a fan of this particular movie, but definitely you guys filling in the background and. We behind the scenes. If you like the giant monster talk, we definitely got some things on the table that we'll be bringing these guys back to discuss. And but obviously too, you guys are also just movie fans in general. So I'd like to get both of you either together, or separate, whatever combination. Mix and match. Who knows? Maybe we'll get Matt on this show one day.
Well, he did Godzilla 98 with us.
Yeah, he did.
But he's. I don't know. I hope he's okay.
Yeah,
I don't know where he is.
I'm hoping tomorrow he lets us know he just fell asleep. But yeah, so
was Godzilla 98 my last episode, or was my last episode the big hit?
Oh. Well, I think it was Godzilla.
Yeah,
I don't know.
We did back to back almost.
Yeah, months. I did both of those with you guys.
Yeah,
not too far from each other.
I think we did Big Hit maybe in March, and we did Godzilla in April, if I'm remembering correctly. But yeah, that's way too long. We need some more Jelly. We need some more Byrd. So we'll be coming to you soon, fans, with some more monster mayhem and just other great movie madness. So thanks again, everybody, for listening to the show. We appreciate it, and we'll see you next time in the movie graveyard.
Yep.
You're listening to the Electronic Media Collective Podcast Network. Yeah, it's a mouthful. For more great shows, visit electronicmediacollective.com.